Okay, so I made a video last week talking about Derek Carr. He's done as the Raiders quarterback. I still believe that. I didn't do a good enough job probably further clarifying that I meant when I said he's done as a quarterback, I think it's kind of for both sides. I think Derek Carr hasn't done enough. I still really like Derek Carr. I think he is a pro level quarterback, and I think you can win a lot of games with Derek Carr as your quarterback, as we've seen last season. All the controversy around this team still gets to the playoffs in Cincinnati, driving with opportunity to take the lead or tie the game. Doesn't happen. They lose. And now this season, 2-7 hasn't been good enough. I don't think a lot of it really is to blame on Derek Carr, but we've seen the Derek Carr experience with the Raiders. I think it's time for them to move on as things stand. Another thing that I got wrong last week is I thought the Raiders traded their first last year and their first this year. I was mistaken. They traded their first and their second from last year. So they still have their first pick this year, which as things stand, if I'm not mistaken, is the second overall pick. That's CJ Stroud. That's Bryce Young, whoever the Texans don't take. That's still, I think that's the route they should go. I think that's the route they will go. I don't necessarily think Derek Carr is a bad quarterback, but I think it's time for the team to move on. And I think it's best for him. He doesn't deserve this. You see the man in tears yesterday. I have a soft spot for seeing grown men, strong, intelligent men come to tears because you know it means something to them. It's one thing if somebody's an emotional wreck and that's just who they are. But no, Derek Carr is a well put together, well spoken, as far as I'm aware, kind individual, a good person, somebody that I want to root for, and I do root for on a regular basis. He's a great guy. Quarterback wise, it's just fallen off a little short. But watching him yesterday, watching that press conference afterwards, seeing how much a losing team bound for a top 5 pick, the season's pretty much in the can, seeing how much it still means to him going out there at the podium, talking himself to tears. I have a lot of respect for Derek Carr. I briefly mentioned, and I want to mention it even more, that Josh McDaniels, Josh McDaniels is in a competition for the worst coach in the NFL with him and Nathaniel Hackett, both of which will not have a job when the season starts next season. They will not have a head coaching job. Maybe they'll go back to their coordinator roles, which they've done pretty well at. Hackett, how well did they do versus how good of a quarterback is Aaron Rodgers? That's to be determined. But Josh McDaniels, we've seen him now with multiple teams, and the same issues have come up multiple times. And yesterday, he did it against a man who has never had coaching experience at any football level. Excuse me. No, he coached high school football. My bad. He has had no experience coaching NFL football at any level. They're talking about yesterday how he sent in tapes, or he was regularly talking with Frank Reich, giving him notes about what he thought about the offensive line. And that's great. That's great that he's done that, and that shows some sort of maturity. That shows some sort of at least coaching ability, because that's things you need to do anyways. But he's never actually stood out there with the headset on and running the team. He's never done that. But what happened yesterday? The Colts had more first downs than the Raiders had. They had more yards than the Raiders had. They had less penalties. The penalties is the biggest one. It's very easy for an interim coach to step in there and kind of not have the ability to gloss over everything. So it's very easy for them to come out there and be a little sloppy just because he hasn't had enough time to work with every single position group, especially since we've seen now a lot of the position coaches be replaced with the Indianapolis Colts. However, they come out there, accepted penalties, 4 penalties for 25 yards. The Raiders had 10 for 74 yards. This is a indisciplined group outside of Derek Carr and maybe a few individuals that Derek Carr has spoken about but not named. Outside of Derek Carr, there's not a single grown-up appears to be on this team. Now, again, he didn't name anybody by name, but just watching the players on the field, watching the lack of response by the coaches, this team is in a dire need for an overhaul. Just rip everything apart and start over. I like Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs had himself a good game. I like Josh Jacobs. They didn't pick up his fifth-year option. He's a good player, but I think they should let him go. Not because of his ability. I just want to see his team ripped from its core. I want to see their best players move on. Also, kind of for their own ability. I want Josh Jacobs to be on a competent team because I think he can be a very top-level running back. I want to see Derrick Carr on a different team. I want to see Max Crosby on a different team. I want to see the players that I like move on. I want to see I don't want to see Devontae Adams stuck on a 2-7 football team, not playing in the playoffs. I want to see Devontae Adams on the 49ers. Imagine if they had Devontae Adams on that team. I want to see Devontae Adams on potentially the Ravens. Lamar Jackson is dying for a top-tier wide receiver. But guess what? He still gets it done. I want to see Devontae Adams on this team. I want to see a few collect guys that I really like move on. And I want to see Josh McDaniels never even a part of this football team again. He should have all gear stripped away at this time. He should be fired today. Don't think he will be. They have a new GM there, kind of wants to save face, try to make it work throughout the rest of the season, and then let him go when all the other head coaches are fired. You know, that Black Monday, Black Tuesday, whatever they like to call it. I know he will be fired then. He should be fired today. That Josh McDaniels should be fired today. He will not be, as a unbiased non-Raiders fan, I feel so bad for Raiders Nation. I know how strong of a fan base that the Raiders have across the United States, but especially on the West Coast. West Coast is engulfed by Raiders fans and 49ers fans. Raiders have a beautiful history in this league, but they haven't done anything at all recently. Got to playoffs last year. Got to the playoffs in, what was it, Derrick Carr's second or third year? Before that, I can't even think about the Raiders being good. In my lifetime, I'm 22 years old. The Raiders have had very little success in my lifetime. In the early 2000s, they had success. Early 2000s, they did have success. I really didn't start paying attention to football until 2006, 2007. As you know, I was a little kid and I didn't get to decide what was on the TV. Ever since I've watched football, ever since I've been learning about football, the Raiders have had nothing but 2-7 seasons. They've had nothing but mediocrity. It's time for an overhaul. It's time for a culture change. Hopefully CJ Stroud, I'm going to assume that's who it ends up being. CJ Stroud comes in here and they build around him. He's a generational talent, watching him at Ohio State. And Justin Fields is really helping him out by getting rid of the mantra of Ohio State quarterbacks are all failures. I'd never buy into that. Oh, Alabama quarterbacks, oh, Ohio State quarterbacks, Georgia quarterbacks, so on and so forth. This idea that these top schools just can't produce top quarterbacks. We're seeing that now. The three big Alabama quarterbacks, Tua, Hurts, Mac Jones, all have winning records, all as things stand are in the playoffs. This is separate from talking about the Raiders, but CJ Stroud, Ohio State quarterback, that clearly no longer matters anymore. CJ Stroud, I think, was going to come in, and I hope they build around him, give him a lot better deck of cards than Derek Carr has been dealt with his time with Las Vegas Raiders. So hope of the best for CJ, and hope best for whoever this next head coach is for Las Vegas Raiders.